People spend their lives running after happiness as though it is a prize waiting at the end of a race. They chase achievements, possessions, relationships and recognition, thinking each one will finally deliver the joy they are seeking. Yet the more they run, the more restless they become, because happiness is not something to be hunted down. As Sadhguru often says, happiness is not an achievement, it is the very nature of who you are when you stop distorting yourself in pursuit of something outside. People spend their lives chasing happiness as though it is a treasure hidden somewhere in the future, but in doing so they overlook the present moment where life actually breathes. Each achievement seems like it will bring fulfillment, but as soon as it is reached, the mind already sets its eyes on the next target. This constant projection into the future keeps people running endlessly without ever arriving. When happiness depends on what has not yet happened, it will always remain out of reach because life is only available here and now. When happiness is tied to outcomes, disappointment becomes unavoidable. Life does not bend to our plans, and the more conditions we place upon our joy, the more fragile it becomes. Even the smallest disruption, a word not spoken as we wanted, a circumstance not unfolding as expected, is enough to steal away our peace. This fragile happiness is not real happiness, it is a bargain made with life that collapses under the slightest pressure. True joy does not depend on perfect arrangements of the outside world, it rises from a steadiness within. The tragedy of chasing happiness is that it convinces you that something is missing in you. Every step of the pursuit strengthens the belief that you are incomplete, that joy lies in the next possession, the next recognition, the next relationship. But this belief itself is the root of suffering. A restless mind cannot know peace, because even when it tastes joy, it becomes anxious about losing it. This is why even success often carries emptiness, because the chase does not allow rest. The very act of seeking becomes the barrier to finding. Comparison deepens this suffering. Measuring yourself against others turns life into a race with no finish line, where someone else always seems ahead. Happiness cannot be standardized, yet the chase forces people into endless competition. In this blind pursuit, they lose sight of the simple joys already present. The breeze on their face, the sound of laughter, the stillness of a moment unburdened by demand. When the chase stops, the ordinary reveals its beauty, and what once seemed insignificant becomes a source of quiet fulfillment. As Sadhguru reminds us, happiness is not an achievement but a clarity. It is not created by chasing, it is uncovered by aligning yourself with life as it is. When you are at ease with yourself, when you no longer believe you must run to complete who you are, happiness flows naturally. It is not a prize to be caught, but the fragrance of being alive in this very moment. The harder you chase, the further it escapes, but the moment you stop running, you realize it was always within you, waiting to be lived. When happiness is tied to expectations, disappointment becomes inevitable, because life has never agreed to follow anyone's plan. You may script your ambitions with great precision, but existence has its own rhythm and it rarely bends to individual desires. The more rigidly you cling to how things should be, the more you suffer when they turn out differently. This is the trap of expectation, it sets up an image in the mind. And when reality does not match it, pain is created. The pain is not from life itself but from the gap between what is and what you demanded it to be. Happiness built upon outcomes is always unstable because outcomes are never fully in your hands. A single twist of circumstance, a single failure, a single unexpected turn can take away what you thought was your source of joy. When your peace depends on conditions, every moment becomes fragile. Every joy becomes temporary, In truth, this is not happiness at all, but a constant gamble where you risk your inner state on forces that cannot be controlled. Such dependency ensures that calmness never lasts and satisfaction is always stolen by the next disruption. People try to control situations, relationships, and even other human beings to secure their happiness, but this control is an illusion. The harder you try to hold life in your grip, the more it slips away. And even if you succeed in arranging life exactly as you want, time itself will take it from you, for nothing in existence is permanent. Chasing permanence in an impermanent world is bound to bring heartbreak. Expectation makes you cling to passing moments as though they could be frozen, and when they dissolve, you are left wounded by your own attachment. Freedom comes when you see that expectation is the root of misery, not the events themselves. To meet life without demanding, to let moments unfold as they will, is to open yourself to a different kind of joy. One that is not conditional, not fragile, not at the mercy of circumstance. This does not mean you stop acting or stop dreaming, it means you stop attaching your inner well-being to the outcome of those actions. You give yourself fully to the process, but you no longer chain your happiness to the result. When this clarity dawns, disappointment loses its power over you. Life may still bring challenges, it may still unfold in unexpected ways, but the core of your being remains untouched. You begin to see that real happiness is not a result of life meeting your demands, it is the natural state of one who has stopped demanding. In that space, every moment, whether smooth or rough, carries its own richness because you are no longer imprisoned by the need for it to be different. This is where freedom begins and where lasting joy becomes possible. When happiness is tied to conditions, it becomes like a glass ornament, delicate, breakable, and impossible to hold with certainty. As long as everything goes according to your wish, you may feel content. But the moment something shifts even slightly, that contentment shatters. Life is unpredictable by its very nature, and if your joy depends on a set of perfect circumstances, you have placed your well-being on unstable ground. A single word, a minor failure or a small inconvenience can be enough to collapse the fragile structure you call happiness. Conditional happiness keeps you in a constant state of anxiety because deep down you know how easily it can be stolen. You may try to control the people around you, the flow of events and even time itself, but such control is always an illusion. The harder you cling to your conditions, the more restless you become because life refuses to bend to rigid demands. Instead of living, you are only managing, guarding and protecting your fragile joy, and this very act of protection keeps you from experiencing true ease. When joy is so dependent, every new desire becomes another chain. You tell yourself you will be happy if you achieve this goal, or if you receive this recognition, or if this person behaves the way you want. Even if you attain one desire, another quickly arises and the cycle repeats endlessly. In this way, life becomes a chase where satisfaction is always temporary. What you hold in your hand never feels enough because your happiness is still tied to the next condition waiting to be fulfilled. A heart that is free from conditions experiences life differently. It does not deny that hardships exist, but it refuses to hand over its inner state to them. It can meet failure without despair, success without arrogance, loss without collapse, and gain without intoxication. This strength does not come from indifference, but from clarity, the clarity that nothing outside has the power to determine the depth of your being. When joy is rooted in that inner space, it no longer trembles under the weight of external change. To break the fragility of conditional joy is to stop bargaining with life. It is to stop saying, "I will only be happy if," and instead allow happiness to arise as the natural expression of simply being alive. Such joy does not depend on perfection, it does not demand guarantees, and it cannot be destroyed by circumstance. It flows steadily because it is not borrowed from outside but drawn from within. When conditions fall away, happiness gains a strength that nothing can shake, and in that strength lies true freedom. Happiness has never been an object waiting to be captured, it is a state of being that already exists within you. The more you run outside looking for it, the more you lose touch with what is right here. The chase makes you blind, convincing you that joy lies in the next success, the next possession or the next recognition. But the truth is, when your inner state is unsettled, no achievement can give you lasting fulfillment. What rises from outside is only temporary stimulation. It fades as quickly as it comes, leaving you empty again. The reason happiness feels so fleeting is because people mistake excitement for joy. Excitement depends on external triggers, on constant movement, on newness. Joy, on the other hand, is the fragrance of a settled being. You do not have to do anything to create it, you only have to stop covering it with noise and restlessness. When you realize this, you see that the chase itself is the barrier, because in running after shadows, you forget the light that is already burning within. A person who does not understand this will live as a beggar, always stretching their hand toward the outside world. They will depend on people's approval, on situations going in their favor, on possessions that can be taken away at any moment. This dependency creates fear because whatever is given from the outside can also be lost to the outside. Such fear ensures that even in moments of pleasure, there is an underlying anxiety of losing it. The result is not happiness, but a restless hunger that never ends. When you turn inward, the search begins to dissolve. You realize that what you thought you were seeking was never missing. Just as the sky is always present behind the clouds, joy is always present beneath the turbulence of thought and desire. The practice is not to accumulate more, but to quiet down enough to see clearly. In stillness, in presence, in simply being, the natural state of happiness reveals itself without effort. It is not created, it is uncovered. To know happiness as an inner state is to break free from the chase. Then life is no longer a desperate attempt to secure joy through fleeting means, but a graceful participation in existence. You do not cling to outcomes, you do not fear loss because your well-being is no longer tied to them. This freedom is the true wealth of life, a wealth that cannot be stolen, cannot be broken, and does not fade with time. It is the strength of one who has discovered that the source of joy was always within. When life becomes a transaction, joy is reduced to a bargain, something you hope to receive in exchange for effort, achievement, or approval. Every action turns into a means to an end, and the end is always postponed. You do not walk for the pleasure of walking, you walk to get somewhere. You do not work with involvement, you work only for the reward. Even relationships are no longer lived for the beauty of connection, but for the fulfillment of personal expectations. In such a life, the very act of living loses its depth because everything is measured, calculated, and weighed against what it will give you in return. When existence is turned into a series of transactions, the richness of the present is constantly sacrificed for the promise of the future. The flower blooming at your feet is ignored because your eyes are fixed on the next goal. The meal before you is consumed not with awareness but with distraction because your mind is already chasing what comes next. By living this way, you reduce life to a ladder that never ends, always climbing and never arriving. Joy, which could have been found in the simplest of moments, is traded away for an imagined prize that dissolves as soon as it is touched. A transactional mindset keeps you in a state of restlessness because nothing ever feels enough. The mind quickly grows bored with what it has gained and demands more. The happiness you thought would arrive after achieving something never lasts because the mind is already bargaining for the next condition. This creates an endless cycle of desire and disappointment, a wheel that keeps spinning without rest. You do not truly live, you merely negotiate with life, and in the process, you lose the innocence and wonder that make existence meaningful. Joy does not come from bargaining, it comes from immersion. When you give yourself fully to what you are doing, not for the outcome, not for approval, not for reward, life regains its flavor. A song is beautiful when sung for its own sake, not as a performance to gain recognition. Work becomes sacred when done with full involvement, not as a calculated step toward the next achievement. Relationships become nourishing when they are lived as sharing, not as trade. In these moments of pure engagement, happiness is no longer a transaction, it is the natural result of being present. To break free from the transactional way of living is to rediscover the simple truth that life itself is enough. You do not need to turn every act into a deal because existence has already given you everything. Breath, awareness, the ability to feel, to love, to be. When you stop bargaining with life, joy stops being postponed and begins to flow naturally. It is not about what you get in exchange, it is about how deeply you participate in what is already here. In that participation, happiness ceases to be a reward and becomes your very way of being. The chase strengthens the sense of incompleteness because every step toward what you call happiness begins with the assumption that you are not whole as you are. This very assumption becomes a wound that never heals because the more you chase, the more you affirm the lack. No matter what you achieve, the feeling that something is missing lingers like a shadow that follows you. You may gather wealth, relationships, recognition, but the inner voice still whispers, it is not enough. That whisper is not silenced by gain, it is fueled by it, because every new possession only proves that you needed something outside yourself to feel alive. The idea that you are incomplete is not truth, it is a trick of the mind. When the mind creates an image of happiness that lies ahead of you, it simultaneously declares that this moment is insufficient. By bowing down to this image, you become a prisoner of your own imagination, chasing a horizon that retreats as you approach. The more you run, the farther it seems, because the chase itself is built on the false belief that the present moment is lacking. What is missed is the simple fact that joy does not arrive in the future, it flowers only when you stop running and stand still within yourself. This sense of incompleteness drives people to measure themselves against others, to compare lives, to constantly check where they stand in the race. Such comparison deepens the wound because someone will always appear ahead of you. Even when you are ahead, fear of losing that position will keep you restless. Life then becomes a battlefield where everyone is fighting invisible enemies and the real casualty is peace of mind. The irony is that in chasing what is supposed to make you whole, you only make your inner fracture more painful. To see this clearly is to realize that the chase itself is the problem, not the lack of happiness. If you stop running, the sense of incompleteness begins to dissolve. You start to see that nothing was ever missing in the first place, only your attention was scattered outward. By turning inward, you reconnect with a deeper ground where nothing needs to be added. In that stillness, the restless craving loses its grip and what remains is a natural contentment that was always present but buried under endless pursuit. Completeness is not something to be achieved, it is your very nature. When you stop affirming lack through the chase, You begin to live from this wholeness. Then joy is no longer fragile or dependent on circumstances. It is not a prize that must be earned. It is the fragrance of simply being. The chase may give you fleeting moments of thrill, but the end of the chase gives you freedom, and in that freedom the question of happiness disappears altogether. A restless mind cannot enjoy peace because it is never truly here. It is always leaning forward, chasing what might come next, or looking backward, holding on to what has already passed. Even when life offers moments of joy, the restless mind cannot fully taste them, for it is busy wondering how long they will last or fearing that they may soon disappear. This constant movement robs you of the simple ability to be present, and without presence there can be no real peace. The mind becomes like a cup full of holes. No matter how much you pour in, it can never stay full. When you live in this way, even happiness becomes a burden because the mind clings to it with desperation. Every smile is followed by fear of the coming frown. Every success is poisoned by anxiety over the possibility of failure. Joy that should have been light and effortless turns into tension because it is weighed down by the pressure to preserve it. In this state, peace is not absent because life denies it to you. Peace is absent because the mind itself refuses to settle. The more restless it becomes, the further away peace seems to drift. The restless mind thrives on conditions. It is always calculating, always demanding, always bargaining with life. It says, I will be happy when this happens, I will be at peace when that is secured. But life does not bend to such demands, and so the mind is constantly in conflict with reality. This conflict builds inner noise, and in that noise, the stillness of peace is drowned out. What you call unhappiness is often nothing more than the turbulence of a mind that cannot stop running. To quiet the restlessness is not to force the mind into silence, but to stop feeding it with endless desires and fears. When you stop chasing, when you stop resisting, the mind naturally begins to settle. It is like a pond disturbed by stones thrown into it. If you stop throwing, the ripples slowly fade and the water clears. In that clarity, peace is not something created, it is simply revealed. Restlessness was only the disturbance, not the true nature of your mind. When the mind is steady, joy is no longer fragile. You are able to experience happiness without clinging to it, sorrow without being destroyed by it, change without being shaken by it. Peace then becomes the ground on which all experiences rise and fall, not something that depends on the experience itself. To live with such steadiness is to no longer be enslaved by restlessness. It is to know the fullness of life as it is, without fear, without chase, and without the endless hunger of the unsettled mind. Comparison is one of the most subtle yet powerful ways the mind destroys peace. The moment you begin to measure your life against another's, you hand over your inner balance to something outside your control. You no longer live your own path, you live in the shadow of someone else's journey. This constant measuring keeps you restless because there will always be someone who seems to have more, to be ahead or to live in ways you believe are better. The mind then concludes that happiness lies in catching up, but the race has no finish line. In chasing happiness through comparison, you never truly celebrate your own moments of joy. Even when something beautiful happens in your life, the mind quickly compares it to someone else's achievement and reduces your joy into dissatisfaction. You might buy something new, earn recognition, or find success, but the mind whispers, they still have more? This whisper eats away at your contentment and leaves you with emptiness instead of fulfillment. What should have been a source of gratitude turns into fuel for greater hunger. Comparison also blinds you to the uniqueness of your own life. Each being is walking a different path, carrying different lessons, facing different challenges. To compare yourself is to deny the richness of your own journey. It is like asking a tree why it is not a river, or asking the moon why it is not the sun. When you fall into this trap, you miss the beauty of what you already are, and instead you spend your life chasing an illusion that can never be yours in the first place. This habit of measuring against others builds a sense of inadequacy that nothing can heal, because it is based on a false foundation. Even if you surpass others in wealth, beauty or power, the mind will create new standards, new comparisons, new rivals. In this way, happiness is always pushed into the distance, always postponed, always placed just beyond reach. You may touch success, but peace will continue to slip through your fingers, because it was never about the outer race, it was always about the inner state. Freedom from comparison comes when you stop measuring and begin living. When you stand in your own ground and see the worth of your own path. Happiness is no longer dependent on being ahead of others. It flows naturally from being fully present in your own life. Then the race dissolves, and with it the anxiety, the envy, and the endless dissatisfaction. What remains is a contentment that is not fragile, not borrowed, and not based on anyone else's shadow. It is the strength of knowing that life is not meant to be a competition, but an unfolding, and in that unfolding, you are already whole. When the chase finally stops, life begins to reveal its quiet treasures. A simple breeze brushing your face feels alive. A bird singing outside your window becomes a reminder of harmony. A smile exchanged with a stranger carries warmth deeper than words. These moments are not created by effort, they are always present, but a restless mind blinded by pursuit fails to notice them. In the pause, what you once considered ordinary transforms into a doorway to joy, because your awareness is no longer consumed by running after distant promises. The smallest things in life carry the deepest power to nourish the heart. A meal eaten with presence can bring more contentment than a feast consumed with distraction. Sitting in silence beneath the sky can offer more peace than any possession you have ever gathered. The truth is, happiness is not hidden, it is simply overlooked when attention is scattered outward. The chase acts like a fog, and in the stillness of pausing, that fog lifts, revealing the beauty that has always surrounded you. What was once dismissed as insignificant begins to shine with significance. You realize that it is not the size of the experience, but the depth of your involvement that creates joy. A flower blooming at the edge of the road, the laughter of a child, or even the rhythm of your own breath. These are not trivial details, they are life itself speaking to you. The pause allows you to hear, to see, to feel in ways that chasing never could. By stopping the endless pursuit, you also free yourself from the weight of expectation. Joy is no longer tied to outcomes, no longer delayed until conditions are perfect. It rises naturally from what is already here, untouched by gain or loss. In this way, life becomes lighter, because happiness is no longer fragile, no longer dependent on chasing or clinging. It is found in the flow of each moment, where nothing needs to be added for completeness. To live like this is to rediscover innocence, the same innocence you carried as a child when the world was fresh and alive, without needing to be earned. The breeze, the smile, the stillness, these were enough then and they are enough now. The only difference is that you have stopped long enough to remember. And in that remembering, you no longer need to chase happiness, because you see clearly that it was never running away from you in the first place. Clarity is the ground where joy naturally blossoms, while pursuit only creates distance. When the mind is clouded, it believes happiness lies somewhere else, always beyond reach, always in the next step. In this confusion, you chase shadows thinking they will give you light. But shadows cannot illuminate, only clarity can. When you see life as it is, without distortion, joy arises not as something to be hunted, but as something that flows effortlessly. Pursuit by its very nature feeds restlessness. You are always leaning forward, running toward an image in your head, and in doing so, you miss what is right here. This constant reaching creates tension, and tension cannot coexist with joy. Clarity dissolves that tension because it strips away illusions and shows you that happiness is not hiding in the future. It is revealed in the present the moment you stop clouding it with endless demands and expectations. When clarity is absent, desire multiplies. The mind convinces you that fulfillment is one achievement away, one possession away, one relationship away. Yet the moment you gain what you chased, another desire takes its place, leaving you in the same cycle of hunger. This is the prison of pursuit. Clarity breaks this cycle by exposing the futility of the chase. It shows you that desire is an endless fire, and pouring fuel into it will never bring peace. With clarity, life stops being a race and becomes an unfolding. You are no longer trapped in the illusion that you must earn happiness or that it can be delivered by outside forces. Instead, you see that joy is the fragrance of simply being aligned with existence as it is. In such alignment, every breath, every step, every moment carries a natural sweetness. Nothing needs to be added or removed. The very fact of being alive is enough. This shift is not small, it changes the way you experience everything. Work no longer feels like a burden. Relationships are not a battlefield of demands. Even challenges lose their bitterness. You face life with steadiness instead of chasing after fragments of happiness. Clarity brings you back to your own center, and from that center, joy is no longer fragile. It is not pursued, not manufactured, not begged for. It flows on its own as naturally as light fills a space when the clouds move aside. Happiness cannot be hunted down like prey because it was never outside of you. The more you chase, the more you feed the illusion that you are incomplete. But when you stop, when you turn inward and align with the rhythm of life, happiness arises naturally. It does not come as a result of achievement, but as the fragrance of being at ease with yourself. In that realization, the chase ends and life becomes not a desperate pursuit, but a graceful unfolding where joy is not found but lived in every breath.